do quick shout outs to the folks that are here. Stacy, Jeannie, Lizzie, Cristoforo, Emily, Scott, Gina, Rusty, Michelle, Sarah. Shout outs to the folks that are here. Stacy. This is our first time doing a live stream, and we're working through sort of things. I think we were like doubling up on audio, perhaps. This is our first time doing a live stream, and we're working through sort of things. I think we were like doubling up on audio, perhaps. This is our first time doing a live stream, and I know why. Because I'm watching, it's user error. Our streaming engineer in the back, Chris, is amazing. He's a beast. And it's almost always like it's speakers who are like, what's going on? Tech is failing you. And it's like, no, it was me. I'm so sorry for that. But glad to see you all. Glad to see y'all here. And I was saying I'm the founder of Happily, the largest and most diverse network of really awesome, badass event specialists who have got you even when you're not there, completely in this virtual space. And today we're having a conversation about what can we do as experience creators to help bridge the urban and like big city and rural divide. In the last election, if you lived in a place that had less than 50 people per square mile, only 25% of you were voting for Joe Biden. And if you were in a big city where there was 5,000 or more people per square mile, so that's what, like a 1,000x, 68 of you were voting for Joe Biden. So that is like just a huge spread. And I think beyond the data, I think we all know this and feel this. I personally, like, I have a family in West Virginia and I grew up in Los Angeles. So I feel sort of like the distance between the type of experiences that my families get to have, and also the exposure to new ideas that they have. And so we were going to do this EXP experience actually in June 2020. This experience is called Heartland, and we had always intended on bringing our community of experience creators to think about this exact topic that we're discussing today. And so I'm really, really like thankful that we now can have this with you. Thank you so much for coming in virtually and sharing the space with me. I want to introduce our two guests. We have Jade Begay, who is the creative director of NDN Collective. Say hi, Jade. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and the work that you're doing right now.
Sure, yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Jade Begay. I'm calling in from my ancestral lands here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, otherwise known as Ogapo'oge. I am Danette Antisique Pueblo, and I am the creative director at NDN Collective, which is an Indigenous-led national organization, ecosystem, if you will, that works to build Indigenous power. And yeah, what else? I work on a podcast with NDN Collective, which I think is kind of important to note for the purpose of this conversation. It's called SCO Vote Den. SCO Den is like a euphemism or like a slang for let's go. So we took a spin on that, added in the word vote, and that podcast was all about the Native vote and kind of the complexities and the gray areas of the Native vote. Yeah, we produced that over the course of election season. We're about to release our last episode, so it was a short podcast series, but yeah, it really went into these kind of issues around the rural-urban divide. And I also moonlight and side hustle as a filmmaker.
Thank you so much, and for being here. I brought two filmmakers together today because as we're in this virtual world, I feel like we're all like behind a lens, and to have like real pros who can really be so present and like understand and actually like see and build that intimacy with folks across the screen, I thought would be and asking them to come and share their stories would also be just a really wonderful gift and experience for us. And Hope Hall, who is our other guest, is also a gift. She's a part of our sort of founding EXP community, and gave a talk actually about like mindset that was like all 5 stars. I don't know if I ever told you about your reviews, Hope, but you were like, boom, knocked it out of the park. And so we're so excited for you to be here. And Hope was the official videographer for the Obama White House, and was recently on the trail as the official videographer for Elizabeth Warren, and did some work as well as Biden. But Hope would love to say hello and hear from you and hear more about the work that you've been up to.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much, Sarah and Jade. It's really an honor to work alongside you. And I wanted to just take a minute, a couple of things at the outset. I am on Lenape ground in Brooklyn. So I want to pay tribute to the first people, and some of my favorite projects that I've ever gotten to work on were tribal led. And I was telling Jade, one of my favorite people that I got to work alongside with on the Warren campaign was Deb Haaland. So I also just want to say, I see some people on here that I'm getting teary. People from my whole life. So thanks. And yeah, I think for me, the way we did a little chat before this with Sarah and Jade, and to me, the way I love learning the most is alongside other people. So what I would love to do is offer this time and my energy to work through conundrums that you are having in your communities and in your community of your inner life. And that is how I learn and grow, which is, if ever a moment in cultural, societal, economic turmoil has taught us such a clear lesson this year, it is that we have each other and we will take care of each other. So let's learn and grow alongside each other for the next 55 minutes. And, this is a very funky way to do it. We don't get to walk along hand in hand and notice the world going by. We're all staring at this grid and at each other. So if there's something that comes up that feels like some other setting would work better to work through, please know that I am here and I'm at the ready for the rest of time, as long as I'm able. So I'm easy to find on the internet, hopehall.com. But just send word and know that I'm your partner in this crazy adventure that is learning and growing and taking care of one another.
Thank you so much for that invitation. And yes, for those of you who RSVP'd and are here joining us inside of the Zoom, would love to, please share in the chat like why you're here, and maybe share anything about like the work that you might be doing or problems that you're looking to solve, that specifically relate to this topic about really a nation indivisible, right? I'm curious to know, just to jump off, like I think everyone is asking the question, like why is this happening? Why is there such a stark polarization between ideology and also sort of our physical spaces and the communities that we're in. I mean, I hope you've been on like sort of doing the tour, right? So would love to hear any insights or about any stories that you might have that could help us understand a little bit what's happening.
Yeah, in fact, I want to reference a dear friend who's on here, Barbara, and I had a conversation yesterday, and I think the way she puts it is it's basically around poverty and isolation, right? And so if we start to shift our lens, and I thought also the way that she did this was so wonderful, which is like that is actually a way for us to see our commonality rather than our difference, which, talking about lenses and reframe, that's the play of life, right? That's how we move from stultified and concretized and conservative, not in terms of politics, but in terms of our bodies, essentially our body mind, is how we begin to soften and play. As soon as you start to switch it up, then all of a sudden, and as you know, filmmakers and storytellers of any kind, this is the craft, right? So the way Barbara put it to me was there is a common aggressor that is different from this divide that we are sort of trying to navigate right now. And that common aggressor is the greed of essentially a very tiny percent of people who live on this planet. And until we start to deconstruct, so one of the great gifts of working alongside Senator Warren is that she is also we share a love of systems and understanding systems. And as soon as you begin to deconstruct this power dynamic, because it's not just economic, as we understand, it is on every level. As soon as we begin to understand our own part and take responsibility for our own part of the racist, bigoted, injustice fueled system that we are being, living in and a part of every single day, until we start to deconstruct that in our own behavior and in our own viewpoint, then to me that's where the work begins, to soften, take a new perspective, and understand our part and what we are contributing to every day in the continuation of this deeply unjust structure. So, no big deal, just that.
Yeah,
easy, right?
No, I mean, it's not easy, but but the idea of just simply starting with an originating point of what's my part, I think that is actually easy, because that's something that is within our own individual control. I think it does feel overwhelming, sometimes there's the weight of the world on your shoulders, where it's how do we, especially in the experience economy, right? How do we, where a lot of things are you have to have a lot of money to be able to access the celebrities and the musical talent that have more of the money, and it's the whole rigmarole, right? So but I think that the suggestion to start with you and what can you do is actually an easy one, at least to grasp, and that's a really great starting point. Jade, I'd love to know kind of what specifically you actually with NDN, right? You actually provide grants and give money to different organizations. I would love to hear a little bit more about what that that grant making and distribution process is like, and who are you funding and why?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as I mentioned, NDN Collective, we are here to simply, well, it's not a simple task, but the purpose of our organization is to build Indigenous power. And we do this through advocacy, we do this through grant making, dismantling white supremacy in philanthropy. So we're actively organizing in philanthropy to distribute and democratize wealth and really get those funds and resources to Indigenous communities. Just a little data point, less than 0.4% of all philanthropy in America, in the US, goes to Indigenous communities. And so when we're looking at issues, let's just take the climate, for example, which, there's been multiple entities, the UN, so many scientists saying that, Indigenous people being the stewards, the land managers of different ecosystems are critical to mitigate climate change and to help us adapt. So having that science, having that knowledge, and still having philanthropy giving less than 0.4% of resources to Indigenous communities, that's a huge gap that we need to be addressing constantly. So that's one thing that we're working on all the time. We have multiple grants. So there's the NDN Changemaker Fellowship, which gives funding to individuals on a yearly basis. So this grant is annual, and we choose 20 people each year and invest in them to build out their solutions, build out their visions, projects, and these projects can be anything from climate solutions, renewable energy solutions, to revitalizing culture and language, which is directly tied into climate justice or Indigenous rights work. A lot of Native communities will speak to the land and language being interconnected, and you need both to thrive. Both need to be supported and fostered to thrive together. So there's the Changemaker grant, and then there's the Radical Imagination grant, which we fund artists and entrepreneurs and technologists and visionaries to create, art and narratives that'll really propel us into the future and give us, that sense of, Indigenous futurism to, think of ourselves and think of our communities in the future. And then we also have community renewable grants, where we offer those to organizations and communities, Indigenous communities, to build out solutions to transition from the fossil fuel economy. So those are just a couple of the programs we run, and then we do, like I said, we do advocacy and policy work. We just launched in October on Indigenous Peoples Day the Land Back campaign, which is very self-explanatory. We mean actual land back. We kind of in the spirit of reparations, we're building this movement to return lands to Indigenous peoples, and really building out a movement to resource those kinds of fights across North America. So that's NDN.
Amazing. And Indigenous future, for those of you who are here in the chat or watching live stream, I would love for you to share just what is that future that you see, what does that look like? And Jade, throw it back over to you. Just like what does an Indigenous future look like? How can we be a part of helping that vision become reality?
Yeah, I think so many things, so many things. Where do I start? I guess, building off of this concept of land back, that is something that is hopefully something we can gain traction on soon. I want to lift up, this potential, this opportunity that is in the works, is sort of, there's rumors about it, there's talks about it, but Deb Haaland being nominated to be Secretary of the Interior. That's huge for Indian affairs just across the board. The Department of Interior, which Deb Haaland could potentially lead, manages the BIE, the Bureau of Indian Education, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and let's not forget it manages land and resources across the US. So when it comes to things like land back and policy around, public lands, this is a really exciting possibility. And we're, I'm praying every day. I'm like, laying tobacco down, just like, please, Biden, like, make the smart decision. And that's it is a smart decision. It's not just a popular one. It's not just a trendy one because she's she's one of the first Native American Congress members. But Data for Progress, which I highly recommend people check them out. They're super smart pollers working on progressive policy. So they did a survey on this issue specifically, and the data came back that Americans would be in favor. I think the percentage was like 70% or something like that of a Native person leading the Department of Interior. So this is also smart decision making, and so hopefully we'll see that. That's on like a policy front. And then I think, going back to what you were saying, Hope, about kind of deconstructing our own biases and the work starting with us, I just want to share that there is an incredible report out that was published by Illuminative and Native Organizers Alliance. And this report gave us some really exciting data and research. For instance, I mean, it's sad and it's maybe not surprising, but it's important to know where the work needs to be done. So when it comes to, and this is exciting for me to talk about because it's all about narrative and storytelling. So when it comes to Native people and Indigenous communities, invisibility is one of the biggest barriers I think we face across the board. And one of the gaps that keeps us from building bridges, building trust, whether that's in media, whether that's in politics. But one of the points from this survey was that 80% of the people, 87% of the people surveyed in this report, which is the Indigenous Future or Native Future Survey, feel that the average American does not care about the Native experience. And then another point is 70% of people surveyed feel that that the average American does not believe Native people still exist. So this is a huge learning for me as a Native person. I would agree with this data. I would say that this data is true in my own experience. And so this is something that, it's on us in a way to, do the work of telling our own stories, because oftentimes we are the ones telling our authentic stories. But this also shows our non-Native allies that there's a lot of work to be done in building trust. So I think when we're in building trust and visibility, and filling, filling those gaps between the rural-urban divide. And the urban reservation divide, we could also say. So I think when it comes to our, what would an amazing future look like for Indigenous peoples, I think it's much, much more visibility, way more resources coming into our communities, and like I said, policy moves on land back.
That blows my mind that like the average American doesn't think that Native Americans exist. I never heard that, or like it didn't ever occur to me, and that seems like such a really great I think, and kind of for a lot of the folks in this room that are experienced creators and have communities where they platform lots of folks, that's just simple lift for us, to provide more visibility around that area. I want to bring in a question from Jeannie Grotto, who's here with us, and Jeannie is a PR Jeannie, and so she brings up a really interesting point where that I was thinking about as well. Like we had actually the most voter participation in over 100 years this election, right? And I think a lot of what fueled that that it was a real drive. People felt like they had to go to the polls to as Jeannie put it so eloquently here, make sure that the right side of history came out on the other end, and everyone thinks that they're right, right? And so that made it really clear that this divide of just what is right and what is wrong, actually she's talks about how within her experiences in the communities that she's leading, it's really hard to communicate inclusively when folks are coming in this kind of right point of view, this hard-headed point of view. Hope you're just such an amazing like communicator and facilitator of like energy and ideas. I'd just love to hear your take on that.
Absolutely. I call it, and actually this is a little tiny segue or sidebar, but I'm going to refer to something that's on the mindset handout that I've given a number of people in this room a physical copy of, but Sarah said she would, there it is, the link. So one of the things on there, it's kind of my like broadside one-pager cheat sheet to navigate this thing called life, but in particular to navigate the obstacles and the challenges and the arrows that get slung at us in our day-to-day. And so one of the things on there is that I refer to, which I use a lot when I get confused. Also, confusion is an opportunity for growth, right? Destruction, space, separation, divides, these are opportunities for growth. And so one of the things that I do to kind of calm myself down when I'm super confused by someone else's behavior, when it feels literally like what you're describing, Sarah, is that I cannot bridge the gap, I call it personal logic. It's like personal math. It's like personal dance. Everyone's got one. Personal voice. Everyone's an incredible singer. Just let them sing. Let's be a judgment-free zone. It's already hard enough, this thing that we're doing, right? And I'll speak from my personal experience, which is that this time that we are going through is one of the hardest. And I hope it doesn't get harder. And so when we have access to the stress dial, when our arm is actually long enough to reach it, because most of the times in life, the things that come at us, they're not in our control. right? But well, I like to say when you can reach that dial, the big stress dial of life, maybe dial it down. Maybe we dial it down instead of ramp it up. Like maybe we see what that quiet, that space, like again, back to Barbara's sort of jujitsu. What if we ask ourselves, okay, I simply do not understand, to your question, Jeannie. Okay, I'm at this juncture. I don't understand how to communicate to this seemingly completely disparate group of people, right? So what if we instead address the space and say, what does that feel like? How do we calm the nervous system, not just of our, I guess the second step from what I was saying before, like we start with ourselves, constantly, plumbing the depths and caring for and keeping the flow moving so that we are seeing ourselves with both righteous and very gentle eyes. And then when we turn outward, how do we turn, they don't call me hope for nothing. I'm going to bring a super pathologically optimistic approach to a divide. But if we imagine that it's, back to we have each other and we will take care of each other. If you imagine that the fabric, the weave of this interconnected thing that is being a human alongside other humans, if it's stressed, frayed, even violently ripped, okay, how do we take that and turn it into a lesson, a possibility for growth, a way to reweave in a way that reflects the tear and the pressure that was on it before to make it even stronger this time? So if you imagine like darning a sock, right? You don't just go back and use the exact same weave, and you make it stronger because you realize this is a pressure point. And back to what I learned, one of my favorite things about working alongside Senator Warren is that she sees things as opportunities. She sees injustice as not only a thing to righteously fight, but actually, like, how do we turn that injustice into information that makes us create a better, more thoughtful structure? She comes to it from a contract law brain, right? And when she realized that so many of these economic, financial contracts were literally written to disempower people who were on the unempowered end of the contract, right? Like to further, it's sort of going back to that tiny percent of greedy monsters who are also just drunk with power. And I come to this like very personally. My mom is a pathological narcissist and I am her guardian. So I navigate day to day, I navigate what it's like to try to make sense of a totally nonsensical structure, which is maybe why I love looking at structures. And as we take the weaknesses in that structure, those are openings. And that helps us then come at it, going back to that original idea of a playful, gentle, thoughtful, kind, loving approach that is a reframe. It's not the same approach that was used last time, because if you keep repeating the same approach, expecting a different result, that is the definition of insanity. So how do we bring a deeply kind, gentle, generous, loving, playful sanity to injustice?
I think it starts a lot with like conversations like these, right? you talked earlier about like poverty and isolation, and in this time of COVID, everybody is isolated in their homes, and social media is like we've had the tool that we've had to connect with each other, and it's it's very like tit for tat. I shout in all caps to you, and you shout in all caps to me, and you send me an article, and I'm going to send you an article, right? But where there's an opportunity right now with platforms like Zoom, right, or even just there's now more of these conversations that we're having being put onto social media. So actually making things a little bit more two-way. It's so much harder to shout at a person. I mean, like, I don't even remember when I've shouted, like, like at a person. But I feel sometimes so much anger, and there's so much permission in the way that the platforms are constructed and the culture that's been created in these social media spaces that maybe I could like type in like all caps to folks. And so I think actually I found that there's a lot of opportunity for us to feel less isolated when we do just lean into the opportunities of like, oh, wow, now we can have conversations with each other from other parts of the world. I'm in Taiwan right now, like here with all of you in other places. It's so exciting, to think about that opportunity. Jade, I'd love to hear a little bit from you about what your community has done like during COVID to continue to gather. What has that experience been like? How has that transition been?
Yeah, thanks for this question. And I also just want to like tease out some things that you were talking about, and just and also connecting them to what Hope was just saying. I think, right now we're seeing a lot of this like cancel culture play out online. And, it's always been there, but now we have like a name for it. And I love this. There was a post recently. It was basically saying that in social justice culture, in like toxic social media culture, fear of cancellation has created an environment of self-censorship, hypervigilance, people-pleasing in real life and online. And that responsibility, accountability, and true change can only be fostered in trusted community, not by strangers on the internet. And I think that's just really powerful, just reminder. I think we can get really in our heads about, what is going on the internet right now. And I think just reminder to really, seek that accountability, seek like your political home in the people, closest to you, and how can you build a political home? How can you build like a system of accountability with people you trust, even if they're not like your closest friends, but how can you build that relationality through like online tools, because we have to right now. But I just, in my own personal life, I've been seeking that, just because, relying on social media or the internet to provide that is not going anywhere. And also on that note, as far as taking care of ourselves and doing this work from a grounded place, and also kind of addressing the gaps and the space between. I think it's important to note that especially now, because of the collective trauma that we've been all experiencing, but just kind of in general and historically, like a lot of people, especially in the social justice space, are coming from a place of trauma. And so when you see things like cancel culture happening, like I often think that that's coming from a place of being hurt and wanting to be heard, wanting to be seen. So I think also just keeping that in mind as we do our storytelling, as we build campaigns, how can this story also be really sensitive and address, the underlying trauma that everyone is processing. Just wanted to speak to that for a minute. But when it comes to the work that, you know, has been done around transitioning to an online space, a digital space during COVID, and I'll just speak to, you know, what I've seen and what NDN Collective has done. You know, I think it's been really hard for, and again, just personally speaking, I can't speak on all of Indian country, on behalf of all of Indian country, but you know, it's been hard. We can't gather. You know, normally throughout the seasons, we have ceremony, we have ritual, we have all these practices that we do in community, and we can't do those things anymore. You know, and not only that, but like the events that bring us together as nations, powwows, art fairs. Santa Fe is the hub for the Indian market, which is like the largest Indigenous art fair in the world, I think. And so that, you know, that was moved online. So all of these things that really bring our community together have shifted, and there's been really incredible efforts from the community. I've seen powwows go virtual during the summer. People were sending in their powwow videos of them, you know, in their homes, in their regalia, dancing alone, but connecting with others. And that was a beautiful thing to see. Something that NDN Collective did in that spirit, knowing that, you know, our community is really missing and yearning for that powwow energy. We hosted an event online called the Skoden. Again, you know, the slang for us, Skoden, it translates to like let's go. We did Sko Vote Den virtual intertribal. So it was an event to really boost energy around getting out the vote, and we did it all in like a culturally relevant style. So bringing in MCs, kind of like how an MC would narrate a powwow. We had a drum group, we had singers, we had poets, all these cultural pieces to interweave. Deb Halland and Cherise David spoke. So that was something that we coordinated just to, you know, again, lift up the spirit around our cultural events, and lift up the spirit around getting out the vote. But yeah, I think, you know, it's challenging at the same time, because Indian country is faced with, you know, less access to broadband and Wi-Fi. So I think those are real challenges that we're grappling with. And there are efforts out there, Native Organizers Alliance, and that's one that comes to mind off the top of my head, working on getting more access there. But yeah, you know, it continues to evolve and present its challenges. I actually, one last thing I'll mention is this past summer, I went and interviewed an elder in Sanders, Arizona, who's a part of a medicine man community. And normally they would gather, of course, in a traditional way, in ceremony to, you know, put prayers over our nation, the Navajo Nation, Dineta, as we call it. But over COVID, over the period of, you know, the last however many months, these elders, these, you know, elderly men have been gathering online and putting and gathering in prayer and putting protection prayers over our nation. And I thought that was just a really beautiful, way of adapting and changing, even though it's so strange. It's so strange to think of like medicine men gathering on Zoom, but they're doing it. You know, they want to keep their prayers, they want to keep their traditions going and alive. So that's what we're doing.
That's amazing. Hope like the first and maybe the last day at EXP, we were in a pool, having conversations, right? And you're like a fish. Like you just seemed so like in your element. And how are you connecting like in this time, and what are some of the experiences that or some ideas that you can share about bringing people together when they are apart?
Yeah, I have always and never are inherently inaccurate words, because they are. But I can honestly say I'm pretty sure I've never spent this much time in one place in my whole life. I grew up moving every couple of years, but I'm also a wanderer. And I love being in motion. And yeah, I moved, the campaign folded, Senator Warren's campaign folded. And I was on the train moving back to New York after being away for 9 years. And on the train, I heard Cuomo declaring a state of emergency. And I have literally been in lockdown at the epicenter. So for someone who loves to be in motion and who loves to wander the world, this has been devastating for all the same reasons that we're all experiencing. I've also really quieted my nervous system around it. And one of the big things that I did was get the okay from my landlord, who lives downstairs, to go out and start communing with what I call Jurassic Park, which is her backyard. Had been pretty much untouched in maybe 40 years. So New York City is zone 7, so it's one of the most, it's temperate, but it's also brackish, fresh, and saltwater. So it's one of the most diverse biological landscapes that you can live in. And so I really connected with my like brutish Scottish roots, and I just started I did everything by hand, no power tools, and I just started working away. And I worked out in that backyard, and we created hope farms and grew fruits and vegetables and herbs. In fact, there are still just a few little chilies and a few little tomatoes out there. And I've been, I don't know about, one of my favorite writers is Michael Pollan, writing around about the natural world. And so I've picked up his books again, and have done the work of bare feet in the earth, which has a incredible effect on the nervous system. And as I referenced before, I'm my mother's guardian, and I've sort of extended that role to I have an elderly and very vulnerable set of neighbors on either side and landlord downstairs. So I do all their shopping and their errands, and I check in on them. And then same with my aunt and uncle, who live here, who are elderly and quite vulnerable. So all of a sudden, for the first time in maybe a decade, I'm available. I'm not the kid that's like, how are you? I'm calling just to see how you're doing. And it has taught me, first of all, I love I guess another way to put it is another amazing boss of mine, Barack Hussein Obama, used to say, everyone can be kind and everyone can be useful. And then his daughter, Malia, added, and everyone can be brave. And I use I have used that. I have attempted to be of service, not just to my immediate like community of my family of friends, my family, my collaborators, but really to look around and say on my block, how can I be useful? How can I be kind? And to actually spend this long in one place with my bare feet on the soil has been beautiful. I am very grateful for it. That being said, I want to reiterate, you know, and Jade, you were reflecting on this beautifully, that this time has changed. There's a before and there's an after, and we are not the same as we were before. And back to the pathological optimistic viewpoint of that, how do we learn and grow and become softer, kinder, more playful, more flexible because of what we are facing in ourselves and in our communities? The level of injustice, the unnecessary suffering. I'm going to start to cry at the hands of greedy, power obsessed, you know, people have not just suffered so deeply, but they've died because of. So I can't even finish that sentence, but these are like, the reframe here is righteous fights. We don't fight just to fight. That's someone else's game. That's a pathological narcissist game. That's a, you know, white male patriarch with greed in his blood. That's not what we do. We don't fight each other just to fight. We fight the righteous fights. We pick them, we thoughtfully approach them, and we fight with kindness and love in our hearts in an attempt to reweave what has been strained, stressed, ripped, broken. And that's how we use these brains and hearts that we have. That's the reframe of this, you know, 2020. We thought, you know, in English, like 2020 is how you refer to perfect vision, right? It's like perfect. And so let's use this year as perfect vision. Let's use the clarity of it. And I know that's a big, hard ask when you're traumatized and exhausted and in pain. So do it gently, do it kindly, do it slowly, do it thoughtfully, do it in your own way. Use your personal logic to help understand someone else's personal logic, and you know, live connectedly, no matter where you are.
I think that like if we start with greed as the source of the source point for our system essentially failing us, then on a personal level and on a professional level, I just want to end this conversation with, you know, inviting you all to think about how can you be more generous with yourself, within your community, with your family, within the work that you do. I think that, you know, that's an easy question. How can we be more generous? And it's a practice. The more you do it, the easier it becomes to do a lot of it, to just a little bit every day. And hopefully that that generosity will build. We will earn the trust of those who are outside of our communities and outside of our circle, and invite them to come in and exchange more with us. So with that, I'm going to end. Thank you all for coming. We will have the playback of this warts and tears and everything, and all up on exp.co. Thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.